Hello and welcome. This is Alchemist X, and today I'm going to be going over a few different functions related to raising units in Taga. The first of which the current image on the screen is related to, is going to be the gear function of RNG stat raising. I forget what they actually call that in game, but you could call it tab number 4. I call it the RNG rocks. But as we can see from this image, there are quite a few different effects you can get, each having multiple levels of intensity. Generally speaking, because of how RNG it is and depending how many of the items that you need to get them, a lot of times I will end up just settling for +5. Usually all damage up is the one that I want to go for. That's the most valuable to me, is going to be damage. But there might be cases where you want all resistance up for your tankier units, or if you're making a specialized gear, like maybe something that has resistance to alchemic freeze that you could then use on a character, or if you've already used up the alchemic freeze amulet that you can get in game, because gear stats will not stack with each other. So just keep that in mind. You could use that as like a substitute, or to help a character that needs a specific stat like accuracy. But I will say most of the time I find just increasing damage to be the most useful thing. So with this out of the way, let's go ahead and actually give a demonstration of what that system looks like and where to find it. Okay, so here we are at the gear screen. So I am going to be using Excalibur as my sample for the gear to use. I'm in tab number 4. So generally, it's a pretty simple process. You just select the gear that you want, hit the flashing blue button. You will consume a specific resource, which is a small blue rock, not to be confused with the larger blue rock for the Pride Seal, but we'll get to that later. You burn the resource, and then that is a stat. That is not the one we want. I happen to know what the all attack one looks like, so it just takes a few or a lot. You just got to be patient and just keep hitting. You can do yes to accept it, and then just redo it again. And then once you get a secondary stat and you've rolled again, it'll ask you if you want to overwrite it, which looks like this. Doesn't really matter if you say yes or no until you get the stat you want. And then in that case, if you are trying to trade up and up, we got all attack right here. So that is what I'm looking for. That's good enough for now. Maybe if I'm feeling really, really patient in the future, I could go for +7. But for now, we'll just stick with +5. So I'm going to say to overwrite that, and then we are all good. So next up, let's go to the unit screen. Okay, so here we are at Dios's Link version rune screen. And so what I want to do is I want to give him some more crit value. So as far as I can tell, it does need to be a 5-star rune. I don't know if it has to be fully maxed out or not. I don't do this too often. Now that I've got a lot more of the rune resources, I definitely could, but largely just because it's something I often forget to do, just because it's a game mechanic I'm not as used to. But sometimes when I'm really, really relying on a character, I will really lean into every mechanic possible to get their stats as high as possible. Matia is one of those characters because I needed her to be able to auto-repeat a hell level, and that was one of those cases where I engaged in this mechanic. So this one, it is the smaller button next to the stat change. And you'll know you're in the right spot because if you select a non-5-star rune, the button will not be there. But let's go back to that crit rune. And then it's going to take us to this screen. And now if I burn 10 of these little orange rocks that look like they have a bite taken out of them, and also the rune upgrade ore, and then also 5 million Zenny, which all in all, cost-wise is not too bad. Basically, that is going to give him, as long as Dios Link is the one equipping this rune, then you get an extra 75 crit on top of that. So let's go ahead and get that going. And now that it's the case, you can decouple them if you absolutely need to. But now this rune is basically married to him, and then you can tell that's the case once it has the blue border around it. And then let's also just go ahead and knock out HP too, just because this guy needs all the health he can get. I use him for everything, so it's kind of nice that I forgot to do this earlier because he's just the perfect sample character. I was also buffing Andex as much as I could earlier just while I was getting ready to record this, and then I also found out that I had not done Lindrake's Pride Rune either, so this has been a good experience for me too, just the process of making this video. And speaking of Pride Runes, let's go ahead and unlock Dios's. So in this case, the Pride rune, it's not a rune that you farm for via levels the way that you would for the other 6. In this case, it's closer to Enlightenment. It definitely, like Rune Enlightenment, would be a kind of a similar way of thinking about it. But instead of an Eye of Truth, instead you're going to use this blue crystal. As you can see, I only have 13 of them. They're a good thing to go for in any coin shops for limited time events. They are definitely worth the time that it takes to farm just because they are a fairly scarce resource. But Dios Link, absolutely worth it for one of these. Now the Pride rune is open, and then when you go into it, it's going to be a whole mess of information. But you have a lot of options. So some of them are going to be universal, like just an extra HP modifier. Now these are going to eat the green gems and the rune upgrade ore like crazy. So luckily they tend to give them out very, very generously. So if you play for a long time, it should not be an issue. But while you're first getting started, like say you're rank 150 and you've only just unlocked runes, it may be a little bit harder to get this going if you haven't amassed a giant mountain of the green rune enhancement rocks. So even if you are not a Japanese speaker, luckily you can get by with symbols on a lot of the items. Like obviously in this case, we would want to go for P attack at the top. There are going to be some cases where you're going to want to image translate them. Like for example, there'll be cases where you can choose between area attack or single target, and that might matter a lot. Like for Dios Link, he does both, but you probably want to go for single target just because of his really, really vicious counter. So you may have to disrupt the process to do a quick image translate, but luckily it's not in the middle of a battle or anything like that, so you can definitely afford to do that without really derailing the experience. Of all the functions in the entire game, I definitely recommend utilizing image translation for this feature just because of how much text there is and how many like mutually exclusive options there are to choose from. Like for example, this. And then this item here at the end, this little green stamp, this is where these are used for. These are used to upgrade certain traits. And then as you upgrade traits, you unlock one option or the other. Let's see, I think that is single target. And then you do that. Whenever you upgrade an item with a star next to it, you'll be given one, and the more you level up the process, like I'd have to finish out level 1, go into level 2. As you unlock them, you start to get more things, like you can get a nice HP boost at 5, and then eventually there's some other traits that do require character soul shards to use, so just be wary of that. Make sure that you've got Enlightenment taken care of, or Enlightened Bond, if they're a character that has that, before prioritizing that. Just because usually you'll get better gains doing it that way. So yeah, I just wanted to go over those features and the function of the items that lead to those features. It's all part of stat raising. I think that as far as the game is concerned, they never really had one big thing to do following the Enlightenment area. So instead they just added a bunch of little things that are stat raising options, whether it's the Phantom Memory System, the Rune of Pride, or making small upgrades to gears, etc. Overall, I think it's pretty successful. So there is one final thing to do. Because the free unit ticket is finally available, let's hop into the summoning screen and see how lucky I am with that. Alright, and here we are. So I am going for part 1 because, as I said in my last video, is just the most optimal for me. There's almost no worst case scenario. So let's see if we can do better than like 100 Mitsuha shards or 100 Lycaris shards. So of course it's going to be red because one's guaranteed, but this is great because there are 2. So that means getting 2 featured units would be way better than normal. So the guaranteed one, is going to be Ultima Link version. So yeah, that's pretty cool. I'm running out of space in my soul port, but as far as a good wind magic damage dealer, that's a pretty good spot. I'm willing to go out of my way for him a little bit. And then the second one, looks like we got Nidhogg. So yeah, there was just 2 reds. Everything else was blue, so this is all we get. But honestly, this is a better pull than most of the ones I've actually spent gems on. So getting these 2 guys for free is pretty solid. I'm pretty happy with this result. This was not the absolute best case scenario, but it's not far from it. So yeah, that's all I got for now. I hope this video was helpful, and I will see you all next time.